Hi, I'm Malka Kourosh and welcome to Design Santa Barbara. This week we are in Santa Barbara Design Center with Dana Newquist. Dana is a historian, philanthropist, and advocate, Alzheimer's and dementia care. Dana, welcome to Design Santa Barbara.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. I understand you were one of the first in Santa Barbara to be involved in the commercial computer business.
That's correct. About 1980, I decided to write a business plan and send it to Apple Computer, which I did. So I sent my business plan to Mark Markkula, who was CEO of Apple, who was a friend of Jobs and Wozniak. He was an MBA graduate from Harvard. I sent him my business plan, and I got a phone call. It was Mr. Markkula himself, and he said, "Mr. Newquist, I received your business plan, and I want you to know that this is the first business plan ever received by Apple Computer, Inc."
Oh my goodness, seriously?
I guess most people filled out the application, sent it to Apple, and either they got authorization or they didn't. So anyway, he said, "I really like what you have in your business plan, and I'd like you to come up to Cupertino and talk to me." And of course I said, yes, I'd like that very much. I went up to Cupertino, and as I entered Cupertino, of course you've got no GPS in those days, so you've got a map, and I'm looking, and as far as I could see there was development going on. There were buildings that were just foundations. There were others with 1 story, others with 3 stories, and very few completed, but they were going up all over the place. So I sought the admin building, which I found, and I introduced myself, and the secretary said, "Oh, Mr. Markkula is waiting for you." She brought me in, and I sat down. He had this large desk, and I sat in a chair kind of like this. And we talked. He went through the business plan. Late May of '81, I got my authorization. And it was just very fortunate that there was a space open right next to Harry's Plaza Cafe. I opened Computer Plaza, which was, that's October of '81, Computer Plaza right next to Harry's. And I guess Apple was excited about this, and they supplied the Apple hot air balloon, which they brought down with the captain and all that and crew. It was a grand opening, and we had a great time.
That's wonderful, wow. That's amazing. That's, before many of our viewers were born and they are used to computers. Hearing stories like that, that's really remarkable. I understand also you were friends with our President Ronald Reagan. So can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with the president?
Absolutely. He was a great guy, and he always made you feel like you're the most important person in the room. And I'll never forget the last meeting with him, and that was in about 96 or 97. I just said, "I'd like to salute my commander-in-chief." I had been an Army veteran, and so he said, "Of course." And we saluted. I've got a picture of it. And then he said, and then Joanne Drake, who is his chief of staff, came in and said, "The Prince of Saudi Arabia is here to see you now," or something like that. And President Reagan said, "Well, he can wait." He says, "I want to talk to you." And I said, "Okay." I said, "He's come a long way, And Joanne Drake, she was really in control of the whole situation. So anyway, she ushered me out, and that's pretty much the last time I saw him.
That's wonderful. Well, I've heard that actually from a couple of other people, that he had an aura of himself, which is very
great man.
Wonderful, wonderful. Also, I understand his diagnosis with Alzheimer led you to your current involvement with caring for people with Alzheimer's and dementia. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I got involved, this is 95, I got involved with the Alzheimer's Association. I was mentored through the process with the Alzheimer's Association, and my first facility opened in September of 96, and that was called Alzheimer's Four Seasons.
Wow.
So from there, I had that for 5 years, but in 98, I bought the property on 321 West Mission, so it was completed and licensed in 2000, and the due diligence up front has really paid off because it's served us extremely well.
That's fascinating. Thank you. When we come back, I want to talk with Dana about important work he does preserving Santa Barbara's history. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. There is more Design Santa Barbara after the break.
Welcome to Rugs & More. We provide the West Coast with the most comprehensive collection of new Oriental and antique rugs. Rugs are solid art investments and often become cherished family treasures. Our limitless inventory will warm up your home. Exotic or traditional, tribal or modern, our rugs weave stories through intricate patterns, compelling colors, and touchable materials. #1 in Santa Barbara for over 20 years. Visit us today at Rugs & More, 410 Olive Street in Santa Barbara.
Today on Michael's Minute, I'm gonna talk about what makes a good sofa versus a great sofa. This one is called Malibu and this is called Malibu 2.0. What makes a difference is for the Malibu, we use industry standard wrap, which is a polyester. For the 2.0, we use a blend of angel hair, which is a synthetic down, and down itself. On top of that, we use two different fabrics for them. For the regular Malibu, we use 100% polyester fabric, which is very long lasting and has 30,000 double rub, which is very durable. For the 2.0, we use the highest quality linen in the market. I would like to invite you to come and see these in person. Come see me at Santa Barbara Design Center, 410 Olive. Today on Michael's Minute, I want to talk to you about transitional rugs. Although still majority of rugs we sell, they are traditional and classical rugs, but nowadays more and more designers and the projects they have requires transitional and modern carpet. On this side, we have a very beautifully handmade rug that has classical designs from Ziegler and Company, Sultanabad. On this side, we have an Uşak design. Uşak is a town in Turkey that originally made classical Turkish designs from 1,000 years to today. They're still making them. This particular one has a classical design, but has all the colors of today's interior. So it's beige with a little bit of eggplant color and gray in it. To see thousands of transitional, modern, and classical rugs, come to Santa Barbara Design Center, 410 Olive. Welcome back to Design Santa Barbara. I'm here with Dana Newquist and going to talk about important work preserving history. Dana, you're the president of Montecito Historical Archives and Santa Barbara chapter president of Antique Automobile Club of America. Can you please tell us about these organizations?
I met via the video store that I opened in '86. I met David Myrick, and he was the de facto historian for especially Montecito, but also he was much more broad spectrum than that. I mean, I would say mostly the Central Coast, but he had written 13 books on railroading in the West, and also books on San Francisco and others. So he was a prolific author. He collected so many articles, and he collected periodicals and different communications with different high-profile people. His house was a repository of historical facts, books, maps, you name it. And he died in 2011. His trust that he had written in 91 specified that his archive would go to the Montecito Foundation. And that time, it was the only, in 91, that was the only 501c3 that could accept maybe his archive. Well, as he was failing in health, I used to see him at Casa Dorinda almost daily. And so I asked him many times if he had everything set, that he wanted all his wishes met within the trust. And he said, Dana, he said, you know, I know what's going to happen. He said, the foundation will be ill-prepared to take all my archive. And what I'd like to do is I'd like a nonprofit set up that will accept my archive and preserve it. And I said I would do that. So starting after his death in 2011, I started the paperwork for what is now called the Montecito Historical Archive, which we have a DBA Montecito Museum. And so all his archives are in our possession, and that's a huge, huge undertaking in that. And I've got a board of directors, I have volunteers that come in, but we're digitizing most of that archive. And what you can imagine, we had 472 banker boxes.
Oh my goodness.
Full of materials. It was just huge. So we would take maybe 10 boxes at a time, process them, digitize them, and go on to the next 10. The archive is doing well. We're starting a series this week, which is over at the El Montecito Presbyterian Church. We have a lecture series, and this one features Neil Graffey, who's a well-known historian here. He's going to talk about the Montecito Hilltop Barons, and we're going to do a series of those probably quarterly.
Excellent. And the automobile club?
Yeah, I've always been interested in cars since I was a little kid. My older brother had his first car was a 1940 Plymouth, which was rusted, rotten. It didn't run. What he had to do is put a new power plant, new engine in it, and he had a group of buddies. And so I was just a little kid watching this, and they would ask me for a screwdriver or a 9/16 wrench or whatever, and I was very eager to supply these things to these guys. Anyway, and then I would tinker with my mother's vacuum would break about once a month. I was one of 7 kids, and so she was quite busy. And so I'd take her vacuum apart and fix it. And, you know, and I had, I guess, a good mechanical ability. So anyway, as time went, and I could afford, my first car was a 57 Chevy. It was a 150. It was a 2-door. And being from Chicago, it had rust all over the place. So in 1965, the day I graduated from high school, I had been to Riverside the winter before for winter break, Christmas break, and I saw my sister pick me up, and I'd been wearing this heavy coat, and I had galoshes and all kinds of stuff. I took the train from Chicago, and I embarked at San Bernardino, and I looked around. It was 80 degrees in the middle of December, and I was, I saw all these funny-looking trees that I'd never seen before. And then she took me down to Newport Beach, and the beach boys were playing, and all the girls seemed to be naked on the beach, and I thought, this is for me. I gotta come here. So the day I graduated from high school, I loaded up my rusted out 57 Chevrolet and headed to California. And I visited back east, or in Chicago, but I would never relocate back there.
Well, we want to keep this a secret, so not too many
Keep
people.
it a secret. Yes.
That's wonderful. My next question is, why is preserving our area's history so important?
Somebody said, if you don't know where you came from, you will never know where you're going. So, and I believe that completely. Heritage is a big thing. And, there's so many personalities out there that we've lost. And it seems like, for example, David Myrick is a great example. We'd go to lunch almost weekly, and he would stop sometimes in front of a building or an estate, and he'd say, you see that house over there? He said, it was built in 1901 by Thomas Smith, and he was from Michigan. His architect was Joe Blow or whatever, and it was finished in 1902. It was 10,000 square feet. He had such a depth of knowledge and such a great recall. So I got all these history lessons from him, which I wish I'd recorded all of them. But luckily, we have his books on Santa Barbara, Montecito. And so not having to record all that stuff, most of that is in his books. And I remember I worked with Salud Carbajal on a number of projects, and I was in his office, and I was asking about something to do with Manning Park and the use of the scout station up there for Montecito Historical Archive. And so I noticed on his desk, right on top, David Myrick's books. So I thought, oh, that's coincidental that you have. He says, I use them for reference all the time. I have to have them. And talking to Aaron Graffey, Neil Graffey, and others, and Neil told me something that I find interesting. He said, I fact check every historian to make sure their dates are right, time, places, and so forth. He said, but when it comes to David Myrick, I don't have to fact check. He is right on everything. So anyway, but getting back to why is our heritage important? Well, it is important. And as we go, we're going to lose very important people, just like Michael Tobes we lost. Yes. We need to get these histories, and we need to preserve them. And part of the lecture series, we're going to ask people out there in the audience for pictures or documents that they might have from their family, so they can be in our repository for safekeeping.
That's wonderful. I understand you have quite an impressive collection of antique automobiles. I love cars myself. Can you tell us about some of them?
Yeah, I didn't focus too much on the Antique Automobile Club, but it's because of the collection. I was tapped by Jeremy Haas, and there's another name. He's been gone probably 10 years. He was an attorney in town, great guy. And I was at Costco one day, and I was looking at some books. He tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Hey, Dana," he said, "I want you to be the president of the Antique Automobile Club." Okay, why? And he said, "Well, I'm tired." He said, "And you've shown up to a couple meetings, and I think you'd be the right guy." And I said, "Well, don't you have to have some kind of a vetting process with your board or something to do this?" He said, "Oh, I'll get it done." Over the last 10 years, I've worked very hard on the Antique Automobile Club. We have 116 members now.
Wow.
And we have a great group of people. Seth Hammond is part of it, and he has set land speed records. We've got 3 Pebble Beach judges, and I could go on and on and on with. But as far as my car collection, I like things that are oddballs, and so I seek out things where people probably wouldn't recognize the name of the car. I have 2 Franklins, I have a Packard, I have 2 Pierce Arrows, I have a Hupmobile.
What is it called?
Hupmobile.
Hopmobile. I never heard about that.
I have a Stanley Steamer.
Stanley
Yes,
Steamer.
I do.
Yeah, heard about that.
And you know, that's probably the most interesting car I have, and that was the car that got Jay Leno's attention. You don't see a Stanley Steamer for sale too often, and I saw one in Hemmings Motor News, and I didn't know anything about steam or how they worked. So I asked the man who owned this, and he was in New Jersey, about his steamer and the history of it and so forth. Anyway, we worked out a deal, and a transport was picking up the Stanley Steamer and bringing it to the Murphy Auto Museum, and I'm involved with that. So what I did is I wrote Jay Leno a letter. I had seen him dealing with steam cars, and I'd been to the Big Dog Garage, and I think his favorite cars are steam cars.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, I wrote him a letter. I said, "Jay, I'm getting a Stanley Steamer. It's about to be delivered. I don't know anything about steam. Can you help me out?" And so about maybe a week, 2 weeks after I sent the letter, I'm sitting at dinner with my wife, and the phone rings, and it's Jay Leno. And he said, "Well, when are you getting the car?" And by now it's January. And I said, "Well, it arrived at the Murphy Auto Museum on Monday." And I said, "I haven't done anything with it. Now it's like Wednesday." And he says, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, if you could show me how to steam it up, I would really be appreciative." And he said, "Well, I'll be at the Barrett-Jackson auction Friday." He says, "I'll fly back Friday night, and I'll meet you at Big Dog Garage if you can bring it down there on Saturday."
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Hey, you got a deal." So I loaded it up, brought it down. I was down there at 10:30 as prescribed. We unloaded it, and he had a group of about 6 guys working with him. I wasn't really surprised, because I'd seen him in action before, that he really became the mechanic for the whole thing. I mean, he had the blowtorch. He was telling everybody what to do and how to do it in the sequence. He was under the car. He was lighting the pilot, which lights the burner, and that has to be done in sequence. So the Stanley Steamer, even to this day, I have to have a primer on how to start this thing. It is not intuitive. It's a step-by-step process. You're using 3 different fuels. Your first fuel is a hexane, which you really can't get anymore, so you use like a Coleman stove kind of material. It's like kerosene. And then you can use a combination of diesel fuel with unleaded gas as your main fuel. And then, of course, you have to have water for your boiler. So you're using 3 mediums to fire this thing up and get steam. Pressure, it takes realistically, if you've got everything right, if you're good, it's a half an hour to get it steamed up.
Just to turn it on.
Just to get going.
I'm going to the hospital. Hey, let's turn the car on.
You're better off walking. So you'll never find an emergency outfit using a steam vehicle.
I hope not.
Never. Anyway, so he steamed it up for me. We went for a ride. He was the first one to drive it. He complimented on how well it drove and how much power it had. And then I drove it. And I've driven it a few other times. And the car is amazing. It's a 1917, so it's 100 years old. Its ownership, the first owner owned it from date of delivery to 1988.
That's absolutely stunning. Please join us next week for another episode of Design Santa Barbara with Dana Newquist.